What is hope? And how do you know if you have it? And if you don't, does that make you hopeless? Let's break it down. Growing up, I always associated hope with wishful thinking, right? Like I always hoped that my friends would be able to come over and play. And I hoped that maybe we would be able to go swimming. And even now, as Christmas gets closer, I remember I used to hope that maybe I would get the favorite toy that I've always wanted for Christmas. And I think this is how in modern society we associate hope with today. We always associate hope with an expectation or a desire for something to happen. And this is where we get into trouble with hope, because when we desire to receive something and we don't receive it, then we start to feel disappointed. Or if we have an expectation for something to happen and our expectations aren't met, we become frustrated. And this is where we start to wrestle with this tension of hope. Because when we are in a situation and we desire to receive something, and maybe we do receive it, but it doesn't fulfill us in a certain way, it doesn't satisfy us in a certain way, then when we desire to receive something and are not satisfied, we start to blame the thing that didn't satisfy us. And so we thought maybe a new car would make us feel better. We got the new car and we still feel the same. So we blame the car. And we thought a new relationship would make us feel more fulfilled. And we thought this relationship would satisfy us. And when the relationship doesn't satisfy us, we blame the other person. The same thing is true with expectations. That when we have an expectation and those expectations aren't met, the more that our expectations are failed to be met, the more we grow in disillusionment and the more disillusioned we become. And so when it comes to this concept of hope and the tension that we wrestle with, the more we are disappointed that we don't receive the things that we desire, we start to feel like maybe the situation itself is hopeless. And the more that our expectations go unmet, we start to believe that maybe we ourselves are hopeless. But when it comes to this concept of hope, maybe, just maybe, we were never meant to hope for something, but rather, maybe we were meant to put our hope in something. In his book, Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis was quoted saying, "Creatures only have desire if the satisfaction for those desires exist." He goes on to explain that a baby has the desire to eat because he's hungry, and that desire only exists because there's food that exists to satisfy that desire. He says the same thing about a baby duck, that ducklings desire to swim only because there's water to satisfy the desire for that duck to swim in. But then Lewis goes on to ask the question, what if I have a desire that no experience in this world could ever satisfy? His conclusion is that the only probable explanation is that we were never meant for this world, but for another. And this is why the understanding of hope is so important for the Christian, because Christian hope isn't hoping for something, but rather it's putting our hope in something. This is what makes Christian hope so important, because hope is rooted in the concept of belief. What is belief? Belief is simply being persuaded that something is true and trustworthy. And for the Christian, we put our hope in Jesus Christ. This means that we believe, that we are fully persuaded that everything that Jesus has done and said that he will do is true, and that he is trustworthy to do it. And so when it comes to desires that we have in this life that cannot be satisfied in this world, we have put our hope and our trust in Jesus, believing that those desires that can't be satisfied in this world will be satisfied in the next. And that is why we put so much hope in heaven. Now, don't get me wrong. The hope we have is not just to be able to go to heaven, but the hope that we have in heaven will directly affect the hope that we have in this world now. In the Bible, Hebrews 11:1 says, "Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, and the conviction of things not seen." This means that the more we put our hope in Jesus and the more that we put our hope into eternity, the more that it grows our faith here on this earth and shapes our conviction to live out the very things that we hope for. And just because that we have hope doesn't mean that everything in our life is going to be easy. Romans chapter 5, verse 3 says this, that we rejoice in our suffering, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not disappoint, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit, who has been given to us. The more we put our hope in Jesus Christ, the more our character and endurance will develop so that we will have the faith to live out the convictions of the very things that we hope for. C.S. Lewis continued to say, if you read history, you will find that the Christians who did the most for the present world were just those who thought most of the next. Precisely because their minds were occupied with heaven. It is since Christians have largely ceased to think about the other world that they have become so ineffective in this world. Aim at heaven, and you will get earth thrown in. Aim at earth, and you will get neither.